China+1's already begun. The world's leading edge mobile phone. We are making 1/3 of it. China is making 2/3 of it. Given the COVID lockdowns, it's probably going to be a 50-50. We and China will share iPhone 14 production. But that's a nice case study that China+1 is underway. I think it will spread to more industries.
China keeps repeating lockdowns and closures. China has always been considered the top place for foreign direct investment. However, the recent event and some long-term issues related to geopolitics and demography, I think, are increasingly putting India to an advantage.
Become much more difficult to do business in China. Some of the Southeast Asian countries, as well as India, are in a very good position to attract these businesses that are leaving China.
China's economy is slowing down. It's caught in a punishing zero-COVID trap. Even as countries that suffered far worse COVID outbreaks return to a sense of normalcy, in China, tens of millions of people continue to be confined to their homes in lockdowns. It's come at a great economic cost. In July, the youth unemployment rate reached 19.9%. Operations in many factories have been downscaled. China's third quarter growth stands at 3.4%. Experts believe 2022 will be the worst year in decades for the world's second largest economy. And the entire world will feel the ripple effects.
Through COVID, what happened was the West realized that it is sorely dependent on China for a whole variety of things, not least electronics, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals, active pharmaceutical ingredients, API in other words. And even within the first year of COVID, it was apparent to Western powers that this degree of dependence on China was not healthy for the Western economies.
But is the so-called zero-COVID policy the reason for this decline of the Chinese economy?
Xi Jinping's zero COVID policy is probably the biggest hurdle that the foreign companies have to overcome. The other issue, of course, are the human rights issues right now, and that the United States has sanctioned a number of companies and officials over in China, and it's just making it more difficult for foreign companies to operate there because the environment is uncomfortable. Another factor is that just recently the Biden administration limited U.S. sales of high technology items to China. So all of that makes it a very difficult environment in which to operate. And then the other, I would say the last factor is potential hostilities against Taiwan. That if military hostilities were to break out across the Taiwan Strait, it would be very difficult for foreign firms to continue to operate in China.
Supply chain disruptions brought on by the pandemic and China's tight COVID controls have ignited a debate about the China+1 strategy. But what's the crux of this approach? The phrase captures the strategy that many large manufacturers are following to increase the diversity and resiliency of their supply chains by moving some Chinese-based sourcing to other countries. On the 23rd of October, Xi Jinping created history. He became the first leader of the ruling Communist Party after party founder Mao Zedong to get re-elected for an unprecedented third term in power. He could now, in theory, be ruler for life. Soon after the announcement, China's currency, yuan, hit a 14-year low against the dollar. Many corporates and companies sought to divert money out of the country. In 2019, China accounted for 28.7% of the total global manufacturing output, making it the world's largest manufacturing sector. But that's changing now.
It's true that China has political stability, but this stability is at the cost of severe repression, because as soon as they release the repression, they are presuming there will be a lot of instability. So this may also prejudice long-term plans of all the manufacturing industry.
What's further, I think, exacerbated Western concerns vis-a-vis China is the election of a Chinese Politburo, where all the reformers were thrown out and military men, spies, hawks of various sorts were brought into the Politburo. So the concerns are growing in the West, the need to reduce their dependence on China.
So what options do Western countries have? Apart from China, which are the production hubs that the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union can turn to? And can China's loss become India's gain?
Well, certainly Vietnam. And Vietnam, again, is in a very good location. It's a coastal country, a very long coastline. It has ports. Again, the ports can be developed more. The United States now has good relations with Vietnam, as do many other countries. Philippine-U.S. relations have improved under the current Philippine Marcos administration. And we are seeing more U.S. and other foreign investment in the Philippines, because again, the wages are low there. Of course, there's Australia and New Zealand, but I would say probably Philippines and Vietnam are the biggest beneficiaries, and in addition with India.
On the 15th of November, the human population touched 8 billion. According to the United Nations, India is set to become the world's most populous country next year by surpassing China. Let's look at some projections from the World Bank. Between 2020 and 2040, India's population aged 15 to 59 years is expected to increase by 134.6 million. On the other hand, China's, weighed down by a rapidly increasing aging population, is projected to enter a severe aging phase in 2035, with 400 million people above 60 years. This heralds many opportunities for India. Can India seize this labor force advantage?
India has a population that is comparable to that of China. However, it has more long-run prospects. If you take India's median age, 50% of the population in India is below the age of 29, whereas in China it is below the age of 39. So this gives China this advantage for its aging and makes India more favorable for the future.
For China, its labor force has been a key driver of the country's economic growth. The prospect of a rapidly aging society combined with falling birth rates have become a big concern for its economic progress. Rising wages and labor unrest in China are also prompting many foreign companies to diversify their production into other Asian markets.
Wages are lower in Southeast Asian countries than they now are in China. One of the big reasons why foreign companies went to China is because China had a nearly inexhaustible supply of low-wage labor. China, has benefited from oodles of low-wage labor, but as those workers became more skilled, those wages have gone up, right? And to be honest, China has, if you don't mind an English, term, an English like saying, China has like sucked all the air out of the room. While the China market is still attractive, it's not as attractive as it used to be. And so other countries are kind of hedging their bets, and they're looking at Southeast Asia and India. And those countries have a lot to offer.
Let's look at some examples. Indonesia has the fourth largest workforce in the world and by far the largest in Southeast Asia. Vietnam has become an increasingly attractive place for business of all types. Bangladesh has emerged as a powerful garment manufacturing country in the past decade. Much of the growth is attributed to the availability of cheap labor. Can India offer this labor model for big corporates looking for a change?
If you look, anything which is labor intensive, we honestly are not very good at it, right? So t-shirts, sports shoes, jackets, anything which requires low wages, unfortunately, India cannot compete. Minimum wages in India are high. And even though Chinese wages have risen, countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh are far more competitive relative to India in anything which has a kind of sweatshop type element to it. Where India is able to compete is industries where there's a knowledge element to it. So it can be outright knowledge processing, TCS, Infosys, the entire IT services industry, where we are a world leader, or it can be manufacturing, but with a heavy knowledge component. API, active pharmaceutical ingredients, is an example of that. This is where India is now world class. This is where billion-dollar market cap companies are emerging over the last 3-4 years, which can go head to head with anybody in the world, whether it is China or whether it's a European country. And this is where we believe there's plenty of export potential.
In 2019, Google announced it will be investing $10 billion to bring internet access to the 1.35 billion residents of India within the next 5 to 7 years.
We will do this through a mix of equity investments, partnerships, and operational infrastructure in ecosystem investments.
It sent out a clear message to the world. India has the opportunity to leapfrog in exponential technologies.
What foreign companies really are looking at now is new or next generation technology. We're talking about information technology, artificial intelligence, electronic vehicles, automation. India has a very good education system. India's techies are so good that a lot of them are working in the United States and abroad. Okay, so let's bring them home and work on next generation capabilities in India itself.
During the financial year 2021 to 22, the foreign direct investment touched a highest ever figure of $83.57 billion. And its gross domestic product is projected to grow at 7.4% in the current fiscal and continue at the same level in the next fiscal as well.
I think India gives more guarantees because it has more to offer not only on a larger scale, but also in terms of variety and of the environment. in terms of creativity, and in terms of political stability due to its relationship with the West. The Apple, for example, is clearly the United States, and now the United States are favoring investment in India instead of China. So many other sectors, not only the manufacturing, not only telecommunications in the manufacturing infrastructure, defense, and so on, but also service industry, insurance industry, for example, even the agricultural and agro-business.
The government's strong intent, and strategy around Made in India. I think there's a belief that India had the capacity to be able to restart their manufacturing operations post-COVID, which may not have been the case with China. They've also got a good business environment, both in terms of access to talented labour. It's got good access to markets, relatively good operating costs, and manageable risks around the political, the environmental, and the economy. And also, I think there's a recognition by the Indian government that India needs to integrate into global value chains, that it will be part of that global infrastructure and not just a standalone nation.
Global firms are looking at India. It is emerging as a manufacturing bet outside China, but can it become a serious global contender?
Factory in China which makes iPhone 14 has been shut for the last couple of weeks. So it's potentially likely that iPhone 14 might move to India over the next year or so in totality. And if that happens, if the world's leading mobile phone migrates to India, then it is possible that much of the rest of the $250 billion global industry could also come to our shores. The second is API. API is again a $250 billion global industry. We have around $30 billion of it. China has $200 billion of it. And I think there's a good chance that over the next 3-4 years, our API industry will double as the West seeks to reduce its dependence on China.
It is a great opportunity for India, but can it create conditions that allow multinationals to use the country as a production base to export to the world?
Certainly, one of the challenges is the red tape, the continuing red tape. And I know India has grappled with that for decades. And after liberation of the economy in 1991, I know the Indian government made efforts to cut down on the red tape, but it's still there. And some of it has become more informalized, maybe not as overt. But that is difficult. Corruption is an issue. Over in China, Xi Jinping came to power and become quite popular in his anti-corruption program. And so that's an issue as well. But if we put those aside, let's just look at infrastructure. One of the advantages that China had is it built up very good infrastructure, that is ports, railways, highways, river transportation. There is no reason why India cannot do the same.
Historically, we have been a country where, because our supply side is so weak, right, access to industrial land, access to talent has been modest in India. You sort of get 2 good years in India, maybe 3 good years, and even with a little bit of foreign money, inflation takes off through the ceiling. Right? Labor costs go through the roof, land costs go through the roof, corruption kicks in, and the economy then chokes itself out. We've seen that twice in the mid-90s and in the mid-noughties. 3 years of good foreign money and India overheats. If we can get our supply side sorted out, access to industrial land, access to talent, if that can be resolved, then we will have a longer run of foreign money coming in without inflation taking off.
India will have to overcome these hurdles to modify its trading relationship with the world. The journey is well underway.
Indian talent will define the next 10 years. No other country in the world can remotely match the 5 million graduates we produce. But my fear is even 5 million is not enough. We need to produce even more graduates, given that the formal sector is creating 10 million jobs a year.
Where people are looking to invest, perhaps where there's both a product that's a finished good, it will be those products that perhaps when market analysis is done, there could be the greatest demand within the domestic market as well as for the global market too. And that's where businesses, when they're developing their strategy, will start to look at those types of decisions.